Program Officer in the HBS Heinrich Böll Foundation Division for East and Southeast Europe in Berlin. We are hosting this meeting in this event here from Berlin, but of course, this discussion relates very strongly to our activities in Ukraine. And we prepared this event in close coordination, in particular with my colleague, Heinrich Böll Foundation Kiev Office Program Coordinator for Energy and Climate Justice, Oksana Alieva, who's present here as well. And I should say that actually the idea to hold this online discussion appeared above all in the exchange in our chats with our friends and partners from the Center for Environmental Initiatives EcoAction, because some of the recent decisions raised, on the energy and electricity market reform in particular, raised our concern about potential delays of necessary steps to redesign the energy sector towards sustainability and decarbonization. And we felt that it is necessary to understand better what is going on here and to share this with reform stakeholders in the European Union. That's why we are holding this discussion this afternoon, and I'm glad that you are with us. Thank you for your interest. But before we get deeper into the topic, let me address a few technical issues. First, I want to remind everyone that this discussion will last only 1 hour. In the first half, we will listen to the prepared inputs of our invited speakers, and in the second half is devoted to your questions and comments. And because we have a limited time frame, I already now want to ask you to be short and concise in your comments. How would it work to contribute from your side to this discussion? Most of you are probably already familiar with the Zoom platform and how it works. I would ask you to raise the hand, the virtual hand in the Zoom function. You see that if you open in the bottom bar of your screen the participants list, and then you have the opportunity to press a button for raising hand, and then I will see who wants to contribute a comment or a question, and then I can ask you individually to open your microphones to contribute to the discussion. Yeah, and it is of course your personal decision whether you want to switch on your video or join in with audio only. Third issue on the technical side, for any comments, you can also use the chat function here in the Zoom platform during the event. But depending on the amount of the chat messages, I will hardly, as a moderator, I will hardly be able to relate to these chat messages during the discussion. Yeah, that is mainly works for general comments towards the overall audience. We will record this event. Please be aware of it, and it will be made available afterwards online for those who cannot be with us this afternoon. And yeah, this is it basically. We have, you see him with a help symbol in the list of participants. We have our technical host, Martin, with us. And in case you have any technical issues, you can send a private chat message to him. Yeah, now to our topic. Usually the international discourse on energy with regard to Ukraine would focus on natural gas. It used to focus on natural gas very much in the past years. In this field, the situation somewhat calmed down since the new transit agreement was concluded in late December. now the focus shifted much more to the electricity sector, and this sector indeed deserves more attention. Just to name a few facts, about half of Ukraine's electricity is generated in 15 nuclear reactor blocks, but 12 of them have already reached or passed their initial design lifetime of 30 years. Second, almost another 40% of the electricity in Ukraine is generated by mostly coal-fired thermal power plants, and most of the operating units are more than 40 years old and do not comply with basic environmental and emission standards. Third, the energy sector, and the main factor are clearly the coal power stations, is responsible for more than half of Ukraine's CO2 emissions. Last but not least, large parts of the energy resources for this electricity generation have to be imported, which undermines the energy security of the country. So it becomes obvious that the development of the electricity sector and the design of the market are absolutely crucial issues. And we have observed some encouraging developments indeed. Last year, the installed capacity for renewable electricity generation has rapidly grown. In January, the government has presented its energy transition concept, a strategic vision that clearly aims at committing the country to a path of developing renewables and decarbonization, though perhaps not fast enough as environmentalists might argue. But what is new now about this? And this is that in beginning of March, we have seen a government reshuffling, as you know. However, the Ministry for Energy and Environment, and with it the whole sector, was kind of left in limbo. The position of the minister remained empty. Until today, we have only an acting minister. Nevertheless, a few critical decisions were already taken on the design of the electricity market. The market position of DTEK, the leading private power plant operator owned by major oligarch Rinat Akhmetov, was significantly strengthened. This raises suspicion also because the new Prime Minister Shmyhal is a former manager of DTEK. At the end of April, then the ministry changed the electricity balance planning in favor of coal generation. After all, only this week, the regulatory authority banned the construction of new renewables. The energy transition concept is frozen. So enough introduction from my side. I will now give the floor to our distinguished speakers who will help us to understand what is going on. I will just very briefly introduce them to you in alphabetic order. We have with us Viola Cramon, member of the European Parliament, deputy head of the EU-Ukraine Committee in the Parliament, and member of the Committee for External Relations. Welcome, Viola. Then we have Sergei Maslichenko with us, former Deputy Minister for Energy and Environment, actually even until last week. We have Olena Pavlenko, President of the Dixie Group, one of the leading energy think tanks in Ukraine. Thank you also, Olena, for being with us. We have Oleg Savitsky, board member of the Center for Environmental Initiatives, EcoAction, and independent energy analyst. And last not least, we have Torsten Wöllert, team leader for energy and environment in the Ukraine support group of the European Commission. We will start with Oleg Savitsky. Oleg, how do you understand these recent moves by the new Ukrainian government, and why the electricity market question is so central in it? Please, Oleg, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Robert, for a very comprehensive introduction. And what we see now is very concerning for the civil society, both in terms of general governance in the environment, and that the environment issues, they are being put aside in this so-called crisis management mode. And we see very negative signs of private capture of state governance, basically a power grab, both literally and figuratively, and the government reshuffling brings very strong control over the electricity sector in favor of interests of dominant energy company, DTEC, which also has monopoly on electricity exports from Ukraine. And here I would like to illustrate with the slides. Just a second. Yes. So as you see here, Ukraine has a connection.
So far, Oleg, sorry.
Okay.
Try again to share your screen. Now it seems to work better. Yes.
Yes.
Can you? Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
As you see here, Ukraine's power system is connected to Russia and Belarus, and we operate as a part of the united energy system inherited from the Soviet Union still, but a small western part of Ukraine is already synchronized with NSOE, with European power grid. And the major generation capacity there is Bushtin thermal power plant, which produces over 90% of electricity from coal. And this is major export facility, which clearly dominates electricity exports from Ukraine. And another source of electricity exports is Dobrotvir thermal power plant near to border with Poland. And you see here the special direction. There is a special line which exports electricity from this power plant to Poland. So basically, all exports of electricity from Ukraine to European Union countries is coal-based. And those power plants, they would not be able to operate in European countries because of substandard pollution control and very poor efficiency. The Dobrotvir power plant is actually already 60 years old, and its thermal efficiency is well below any standard in European Union. So the carbon intensity of per kilowatt hour there is very high. So this is just to illustrate what we have in terms of electricity exports. And those power plants, they managed by DTEC Zakhidenergo. And previously, Denis Shmygal, the current Prime Minister, was the head of Bushtin thermal power plant and also DTEC Zakhidenergo. So he was managing the key asset for DTEC. And here you can see this thermal power plant and its ash dump. And just a few weeks ago in April, due to very dry weather in the region, there was a dust storm, and ash from this dump site was covering nearby villages. Actually, this situation is nothing new, but this year it was heavier and more exacerbated than in previous years. Also, this situation is actually not limited to Bushtin. It's just a poster child of Ukrainian thermal power. Similar situation is going on with other thermal power plants. Actually, we have coal ash dump inside the city in Kiev, and we also have experienced a dust storm also this April, and you can see smokestacks in the background. It's Darniska thermal power plant, which is also around 60 years old. This causes the public outcry, and the new acting minister of energy environment is being criticized that she is talking about only energy issues and positions herself as a crisis manager. But in this, there is a certain degree of cynism and craftiness because she was working at the ministry for last 5 years as the head of Directorate of Energy Markets, and she was responsible for many decisions which formed the current situation in the power sector. And especially in 2016, she signed the so-called Rotterdam Plus scheme, which introduced very beneficial conditions for DTEC. Just this week, colleagues from Dnipro city, the Save Dnipro initiative, they released their analysis investigation of thermal power plant and nuclear power plant schedules, which are available from Ukrenergo official information. And they concluded that nuclear power plants were artificially being switched off, and more space for coal power generation occurred even before the official new electricity balance for 2020 was approved. And today we have one of team members from Save Dnipro, and maybe later he could comment on this. So basically, this is what I had to say, and I give floor to you, Robert.
Thank you, Oleg, for this illustrative contribution. And I would just hand over to Olena Pavlenko and to comment on what it means from her perspective, having in mind in particular the context of the international obligations of Ukraine with regard to the obligations in the framework of the association agreement with the European Union and the Paris Climate Agreement, and how all this fits into it or not. Please, Olena.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Robert, and thank you very much for the possibility to speak to such honorable audience. So I would like to mention 3 messages. The first message is that actually the government cannot decide whether realize or not to realize the international commitments of the country. Ukraine does have a lot of international commitments to develop renewables, to move forward with environmental protection and also to decarbonization. Under the Energy Community Treaty, we have up to 10 EU directives related to renewables and environmental issues. We also have EU directives in the association agreement. We also signed Paris Agreement. We were one of the first countries. So all of this now should be realized and fulfilled, and the government is not in position to decide whether it will realize or will not realize. It can only propose how to realize those obligations. Moreover, talking about the electricity market and what's going on now there, especially with the renewables, I would like to mention that Ukraine also has obligations in front of international investors. So do we want this or not? But we have to respect what we signed as an agreement with them. Many international investors who are from Sweden, Norway, Canada, other countries, some of them took money under the guarantee of international governments. So now it's Ukraine's obligation to respect what it promised to the international investors. So now the government has to find a way to sign a memorandum with international investors to develop our renewable energy sector. My second point is that probably it's too early to say sharply what's going on in our energy sector now. On the one hand, we do see that the governmental program does have support of renewables. The Article 5 of the government program says that it will support of renewables and development of low carbon sources of energy. But at the same time, I would agree that the concept of Ukraine green energy transition to 2050, which was developed under the low carbon Ukraine project, and there were a lot of discussions and public discussions on how to design it. So we can even say that we have public support of this document. So now this document is frozen. And I think it will be one of the benchmarks whether the government is serious with moving forward with support of renewables, decarbonization, and environmental protection or not. So what it will do with this document as a next step. We also do see some signs to support of coal, and do not see the plan of the government how to do the coal phase out. So it would be good to have any information from the new minister and the ministry how this phase out coal plan will be realized. And one more worried information is that there are some plans to change the environmental impact assessment process during this pandemic situation. And so our position is that environmental impact assessment should be done under the existing legislation with no changes, and it should go through the public discussions anyway. So my third message is that now definitely should have more champions in the government who will promote development of renewables, decarbonization, and environmental protection. It was Ukraine's initiative and Ukraine's will to join the Green Deal. And it was not only the words, this agreement that we will join the Green Deal was fixed in the Association Council meeting communiqué, which actually means that now we have to move forward and discuss how to integrate to the Green Deal agenda of the EU. So before, in the previous government, it was the priority, I would say, of the Vice Prime Minister on European integration, who is now the Minister of Foreign Affairs. The existing Vice Prime Minister of European Integration, he's not very active on this. So now our task, I think, as a civil society, and we would be also thankful if European partners could join, is to demand and ask government to define the new champion who will lead this process, how Ukraine should be integrated further to the Green Deal agenda, to the initiatives on development of renewables and environmental issues, and how we will realize the concept of green energy transition to 2050. This is all from my side. We'll be happy to discuss more later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olena. And we heard already a couple of questions towards our European colleagues, Viola Cramon and Thorsten Wöllert. But before they will have the floor, I would like to give the word to Sergei Maslichenko. How do you assess, Sergei, the freezing of the energy transition concept that you yourself developed and presented only in January? Does that mean that the integration of Ukraine into the Green Deal agenda is threatened or is stopped, or what's the current status of it? That would be my initial question to you, Sergei, please.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Good evening, everyone. Yes, indeed, it's in my view, it's an interesting question. I would say it's postponed, unfortunately. We will come there sooner or later for sure, but it was great work done together with the public society, civil society, with a lot of experts. And as you know, I see many familiar faces. Many of you participated in the process, which lasted almost 5 months. We had a number of public events, 6 public events when we discussed the concept. We changed it several times. We received 200 comments actually for the green energy transition concept, which we incorporated most of them. And just to update you on the current status, we also done a great work, working with other ministries and agencies to collect their feedbacks and endorsements. So, and the whole package was prepared. Actually, was week ago, and was actually my last day in the office, and submitted for acting ministers kind of signature, and I signed it off, as well as all relevant ministry colleagues. But as far as I know from my former colleagues, it was rejected and sent for additional conceptual kind of work. So the status is unclear, and this is quite worrying. But I also wouldn't be too strong and dramatic saying that it's end story. I think in Ukraine we have a strong civil society. We also have strong European support, and this Green Deal, European Green Deal, is a good angle to push and tackle the issue. And yeah, we see obviously negative developments nowadays, but I think in the medium term the situation will improve. As regards my departure, also I think it was also a strong sign, and I wanted to stay and wanted to deliver, obviously, but as I'm a result-oriented person and wanted to see results, and of course cooperation, it's for me was quite I posted on Facebook and LinkedIn recently a short article about the decision, about my experience. It was unfortunately a new government who didn't share this green concept, as you rightly mentioned already, Oleg and Robert. environmental issues are not a first priority for the current government, and it was actually missing and was heavily criticized by environmental parliamentary committee, the current governmental program. And also to come back to Alena remark on renewable energy and low carbon sources in the program, they appeared due to our kind of 3 times lobby and request. So it was not in the initial draft. So, and then we come back with the proposals to incorporate energy efficiency, incorporate renewable energy and green energy transition, at least in brackets. So it was rejected, but at least renewable energy as a word definition was put inside the program. As you know, it's a very short program. More will come as action plan, as I understand. And I mean, the word climate, I think climate adaptation was also inserted due to the all previous team of the ministry efforts. But so we have what we have. But I think another issue I wanted to highlight, it's minister's institution is very weak at the moment, because, as you know, 2 ministries started merging half a year ago, and this cabinet dismissal caught us in the middle of the process, actually. So the reorganization was not completed. New staff, people, specialists were in the process of, competitive tender for hiring, was also frozen due to COVID, unfortunately. So, and now a new team is coming, and they also, I understand, trying to reorganize the structure. So situation is, from institutional point of view, is quite difficult, and there are a lot of issues which has to be tackled. Don't have any dedicated attention, unfortunately. I think it's enough from my side, so happy to answer any questions, if any.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sergei. Then I would like to hand over to Thorsten Wöllert. Thorsten, how do you assess these recent developments, and how is the European Green Deal translated into the cooperation with Ukraine from your side? Do you see already new champions for the Green Deal agenda in Ukraine on the side of the partners you are in touch with? Thank you. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much for organizing this video conference, which I think is a pretty useful experience also because it allows to share views and information. So even when we are all out of confinement, maybe this is an experience that we can also have more regularly. What we are seeing now, especially when we are working all remotely, is a lot of smoke, and it is not yet fully clear what will appear out of this smoke. It is clear that there is a profound instability in not only the energy system, but also in the governance system, with with no fully fledged energy minister for more than 2 months now. Is the second acting minister now changing the teams. Nobody knows how long these teams will be able to work. So that is a pretty strong factor also of concern. And what we are seeing now is that everything is short term. Everybody is focusing, as Oleg also said, on the crisis management mode, which prevents a systemic work. And this is exactly what we are trying to do. I mean, the EU and Ukraine, we try to step by step go ahead with a systemic and structural energy partnership. And we see the results in some areas. For instance, on the gas side, we have worked on this, and you mentioned this, we started with that for the last 5 years, and now the situation is much better than it was 5 years ago. On electricity, it was more difficult. We started later, and also the law which regulates the sector has been adopted much later. And now there are a lot of really serious implementation issues, which are leading to non-paid bills, monopoly structures, ignoration of some rules, and also some technical decisions which are not really helpful. And what we are trying to focus on is to ensure that the systemic cooperation, which is about European Green, which is about integrating our energy systems, will go ahead when the smoke disappears. We are also, I'm relatively confident that we will see some sort of compromise on renewable energy. It was clear already 1.5 years ago that the system as it was designed then would not be sustainable. So we supported Ukraine together with other partners like the EBRD to develop a system which is more in line with best European practices, including auctions for renewable energy. And unfortunately, what we had seen already some time ago has now materialized, that you have a big rush, as we also had in other countries, including in Germany. We had a big rush to complete projects under certain conditions because it was clear that the cost is going down and the feed-in tariff is not going down as fast as the cost. So it became more and more interesting and profitable. We have a couple of tools, and Olena mentioned some of them, to engage in the systemic cooperation. We also have the association agreement where we have just updated the energy annex, and we are now in the process of updating the annexes for climate and for environment. And that is also something, especially on climate, which is of course linked to Green Deal and energy transformation, and where the ministry is in charge. And we very much hope that this process, no matter crisis mode or not, will continue. And we are also involved in some more mid and long-term structural issues, which are also linked to this Green Deal and transformation processes. One is the transformation of the coal mining regions, because they have a structural problem. There's a lot of experience in different EU countries. The people on the ground, the mayors, they know that they have to diversify their economy, and we are ready to help together with other partners like the World Bank, Germany, etc. And we hope that the work that has started on this topic will continue. And there it is interesting to see that we are now in discussions that a dedicated office may be established under the Cabinet of Ministers or the Prime Minister's office to steer this process. And these are signs which allow us to be, well, cautiously optimistic or pessimistic, however you want to look at this, that we come out with some structural solutions when the smoke disappears. We have not yet seen a fundamental change of strategy, which would essentially go back to manual management of the whole sector, blocking outsiders, etc. There's a risk, but we have not yet seen it, and we of course very much hope that it will not materialize, and we will certainly be part of the process to make the structural changes work. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Torsten Wöllert. Please allow me one short question back to you. Oleg Savitsky mentioned the high carbon intensity of the electricity exports from Ukraine to the European Union. And in the initial plans for the European Green Deal, there was the idea on the table of introducing carbon border tax or carbon border adjustment mechanisms. Can you briefly comment on that? Will that be on a longer term perspective? Of course, can that be a relevant tool and a relevant incentive to impact, to influence on the development of the electricity generation in Ukraine?
Well, that's an interesting question. We just discussed it also, I think in February, with Sergei. And this carbon border adjustment mechanism is now being designed, developed for the European Union. And already in the basic design, we have started to involve Ukraine. So we had some talks, and we wanted to discuss this in March, April in Brussels at expert level. The aim is very clear. We want that the Ukrainian energy system, or the Ukrainian production system, which is not only energy, becomes, let's say, carbon friendly, it becomes compatible to the European markets, so that the carbon border adjustment mechanism would not apply necessarily to producers from Ukraine. That's the long-term aim. And then we were discussing several options, but it's very early days on both sides to talk about the options, except among experts in a sort of brainstorming mode. But it is clear that our ambition should be, on both sides, to find a mechanism which allows the Ukrainian producers to participate in the European Union markets, not being subject to this border adjustment mechanism. And there are several options. And we also have time to discuss this, because it is just developing policy in the EU. And I very much hope that Ukraine will continue to engage on this very important topic, because it is part of the whole modernization program for Ukraine. And especially if Ukraine wants to have future-oriented investments, that should be part of it after the Corona crisis.
Okay, yeah, thank you for this comment as well. Directly over to Viola. Viola is for a long time already thoroughly observing what's going on in Ukraine. What is your assessment of the new developments in the energy sector by the new Ukrainian government, and does it play already a role also in the talks in the European Parliament, in the committees, about how to design, for example, the Eastern Partnership Initiative to include efforts to support decarbonization of the Eastern Partnership, Eastern Neighborhood countries, in particular Ukraine?
Thank you, Robert. Thanks to the Heinrich Böll Foundation to organize this lovely panel, and thanks to all the speakers for the valuable input so far. Well, since you have mentioned, I am in Ukraine since '96, and I remember perfectly in '96 debates with World Bank exactly about the same topics we are in now. So for almost 25 years, there was not too much progress. Even Thorsten Wollert had said we are a little bit better in terms of gas supply. Yes, that's for sure. A lot of money flew into the country, and we had at some points definitely, let's say, a little bit more forward and progressive ministries, but definitely not enough. And there's always a big reluctance, especially in the parliament. We have always a heavy lobby against any kind of, let's say, more progressive, decentralized, less carbon intensive energy supply, and some of the reasons are being mentioned by some of the speakers. Of course, it is a regional problem, it's a structural problem, it's a political problem, but nevertheless, coming as a politician and observing the situation in Ukraine, let me at least make some remarks that I see the oligarchy is really pushing back in the person of Mr. Kolomoisky, and with having a head of the committee, Mr. Geros, who obviously is completely in line with the anti-renewable League or anti-renewable alliance in Ukraine, and very closely linked to the fossil fuel energy, I guess it will be much, much harder for the next weeks and for the next upcoming month to negotiate about a real strategy towards more renewables, towards a real Green Deal being or kind of connected to the draft of the Green New Deal or European deal in the European Union. I would like to see a very strict regime when it comes to, let's say, the carbon adjustment tax, which were being mentioned by Mr. Wörlet, and also I would even like to see the macrofinance assistance, which will be paid or is already paid in some tranches. And I think Olena has mentioned this. There is a lot of obligation being signed by different international treaties. So there should be enough obligations to finally verpflichtend to finally demand from the new government a more ambitious energy draft law, or energy renewable draft law than what we have seen for the last weeks. I understand that the vacuum and the lack of the ministry and the weak ministers' institution, what we have seen for the last weeks, is one of the key, let's say, obstacles. But nevertheless, what I have experienced from different angles, the heavy power and the heavy lobbying of Kolomoisky and his people against any kind of more progressive, decentralized law, is of big concern, at least in those committees I've spoken to some MEPs. We will see. So far, I do not see, let's say, a comprehensive approach from the Ukrainian side. There are bits and pieces, and it's not really a vision, it's not a concept, it's not a strategy which was being rolled out. It's more a pushback and a big reluctance towards a real green agenda. Whether this could be changed, or whether the influence and the pressure coming from the European Union, from the advisory group, and also from our delegation or from the Commission would be sufficient to really change this agenda, I really cannot say at this point. I have to say we are too far away, but what I've heard are very alarming and very concerning messages from Kiev and from the political sphere in general. And I mean, I'm happy to listen, but what Robert, you have mentioned at the beginning, I mean, the entire infrastructure in the energy sector is so old, and as far as I was aware of, there went, I mean, in this energy sector, I don't know how many millions were invested from the international community, but for me, this is really a missed opportunity. So the last 25 years are not being used for really renewables or decentralized or any kind of energy efficient supplies. And also when it comes to, let's say, renewable production, the Chinese, they have quickly picked up our idea of feed-in tariffs, and they have built up their own industry in terms of solar and wind and geothermic production. And Ukraine has a big industrial sector. They have great engineers, they have great universities, they have a big tradition in terms of energy equipment production, but there's nothing has been produced in Ukraine, or almost nothing. I heard there's one big producer, okay, but of course then you rely on imports, and when you have, I mean, when you have to take investments and you think about the opportunity cost, you rather rely on the old infrastructure than going for highly or pretty highly costly a new investment. But this is, I guess, a lot of past management mistakes, and now I guess the new government will pay a lot for modernizing the energy infrastructure during the next years. This would be my assessment.
Okay, thank you, Viola. So now our time management is not working so well as I have planned it. So, but still, let's open the round for comments and questions. And I already see 2 hands. And I would like to give first the word to Alina Swiderska from the Clean Energy Lab, because she will perhaps have some interesting comments on the renewable sector, knowing very well what's happening there. Thorsten Wöllert was cautiously optimistic. How is it for you, Alina?
Yes, hello everyone. I also represent the European Ukrainian Renewable Energy Association, and we work closely with the foreign investors who came to the country, and I think that since 2017 most of the FDIs came from the renewable energy, and so far we have approximately 30% of the green energy producers from international investors, and in total that takes 2.5 billion euros. And it's quite significant numbers, and it was really difficult to build trust and to bring foreign investors into the country after the revolution. And we all understand that there are market problems right now, and Ukraine is in this energy transition mode when we have more greens on the grid, and then the government needs to understand what to do with this energy mix, what to do with nuclear, what to do with coal, and what to do with growing number of rests on the market. And of course, the government should have done lots of job, like introducing more manuring capacities, creating storage opportunities, and not lots of things haven't been done for years. And now we see that the government since last October is blaming mostly green energy in all the problems. And by doing that, they're saying there is a need to significantly reduce feed-in tariffs and cut projects which are under construction. And this is probably part of the solution, and part of the industry agreed for the restraints. That's why there was actually there is still a mediation managed by the European Energy Commission. And we're looking forward to the compromised solution with the government, which will take into account the restraints which business is ready to go for. But it would be completely a big disaster and disappointment, I mean, for the country and for me as a citizen, if all those 2.5 billion investors who came to the country would be killed because of the need to solve the problem. And we all know that a solution of the whole energy electricity crisis lies not only in green energy. It's like a whole complex bunch of problems which needs to be done. And of course, we would need more investments into modernizing the grid, into having manuring capacities. And we need this trust. We need the trust of investors, of the lenders. I think EBRD itself invested only 600 million euros in Ukraine. So this is my short comment.
Thank you, Alina Swiderska. Next one is Alex Mikhailenko.
Yep, thank you. Hi, my name is Alex. I'm a part of Low Carbon Ukraine project, and Georg Zachman is sending his regards. I will talk a bit about the economics of the site, so about the electricity market. The point is that we've discussed previously was about the need to modernize the system and to integrate more renewables, and the liberalization of the electricity market is a paramount part in here. In order to really increase the share of renewables and to integrate it quickly and at least cost, you need a properly working market, and this is not what's happening now in Ukraine. We see that more and more administrative control is now the fixed idea of the government, And the main problem, which is the lack of competition, is not addressed at all. More to that, the government has not done anything in the past 9 months to remedy the situation. They only shifted money from one agent to another, but they didn't decide the competition. They didn't help the market to grow. The other problem for renewables is also that they are now the whole output is sold to one off-taker. So basically, renewables are not part of the market. They are not an active participant. But this is what's also important for renewables to be a key player, independent player, is to give them opportunity for direct marketing and receive support, not only by selling to a governmental single off-taker. Other problem with the market is the household prices, and they are subsidized, heavily subsidized in Ukraine, and the latest government decision basically mixed the subsidization of household prices with renewable support, and is now getting the problems that shouldn't be mixed up. They are now a big problem, and it's becoming a political problem more than economical problem, and that's another blowback to the development of the market. So basically, what you really need to integrate renewables, apart from political side, is to have an effective market that incentivizes competition and the pricing mechanisms that shows the real situation in the market. And the current market in Ukraine is not showing any signal for potential investors, and we're talking not only about renewables, but other investors that could bring new technologies, flexibility options to the grid. And with low competition, price caps on most of the market segments, there is no room for new investment. The only way for new investments apart from renewables is the mechanism for governmental support, which is planned by the ministry to be used this year. But we know that the process for the competition, the rules for that auction, is not perfect, and they may not incentivize the most efficient and low carbon flexibility options. So there are a lot of things that are not helping the market to work. They can be fixed. They can be fixed even this year, but the strategic problems, the structural problems of the market, which is the lack of competition and this significant administrative control, basically trying to run the liberalized market in the old ways, in times of administrative control, is the biggest barriers, not only for renewables, but for the whole system. Again, as to political side of that, we don't see a lot of will of the new government, but let's wait and see for the new ministry team. I know the now new deputy minister to Ministry of Energy and Environmental Protection, Yuri Boyko. He has a significant experience in the market, and he understands how the market works a lot. But again, it's quite early to say what will be the next moves in Ukraine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I see one more hand, and I will give floor to this hand, Pavel Tkachenko, in a minute, and then we will have a very short, brief closing round with our initial speakers, because our time is running out. We will extend by 5 to 7 minutes, but yeah, so Pavel Tkachenko, you are the next one. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. I will be very fast. So nice to meet you. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for inviting to the meeting. We are a small group, Save Dnipro, from city of Dnipro in Ukraine. And a few days ago, we did the analysis of the dynamics of coal and nuclear generation in Ukraine's power grid in the past 2 months. And it looks like Ukraine is taking a U-turn from its planned green energy transition. Nuclear power plants are stopped in the favor of a coal generation, and which is the most polluting industry. And 80% of the coal generation is owned by the tech company. And on top of that, it was done quietly almost 2 months before the official announcement of the new plan. And this lopsided decision in dangerous in 3 respects: environmental, euro-integrational, and epidemiological. Because such operation practices are especially dangerous when viral respiratory infections spread, such as COVID-19. And also the bottom line, we see also the issue that the single ministry, which we have right now in Ukraine, will always have the conflict of interests and between environmental and the energy generation. And as we see right now, the last 2 months, that they give the priority to the energy and hiding all the issues with the environment.
Okay.
But thank you so much.
Thank you. And then I would say we have the last comments from our initial speakers in the vice versa order. So Viola, would you like to start? But please very short and concise in case you have something to add, to comment.
I think it was important what Alina has mentioned with the foreign direct investment, and this to keep in mind also for the current government is crucial. When you know that the highest amount of money comes for foreign direct investment comes from the renewable sector, that says something. And I hope, I mean, maybe not because of emission reason, maybe not because of health reason, even I think this would be more important, but this should be convincing to the government. And I'm happy to, whenever we can travel, talk to some of my colleagues in the Committee for Energy and so on. So this is, I guess, a very convincing argument. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Viola. Thorsten Wöllert, what would be your conclusion?
Oh, there's no conclusion, just a suggestion. I think one of the problems why we are discussing in Ukraine renewables controversially is that the concept of renewables in Ukraine is still very old-fashioned. Renewables in many countries is distributed, is decentral. It can be owned by anyone. In Ukraine, it is big, it is centralized, and it is owned by a few ones, a few internationals and a few nationals. And I think what would really be important after all this smoke disappears is to try to help Ukraine integrate the notion that renewables is a local solution to increase the local energy security and to locally fight energy poverty. Because so far, what has happened, a huge solar power plant should replace or compete with a huge coal-fired power plant. And interestingly, the biggest investor in renewables is the same as the biggest owner of coal-fired power plants and coal mines. And this is, let's say, legacy of an old Soviet system where everything has been centralized. So I think that would be a real step forward for the energy transition.
Thank you, Thorsten Wöllert. Last comment from Sergei Maslichenko's side. Maybe you can briefly comment on this difficulty with the competition, with this centralization and monopolization. To what extent would you say, Sergei, that DTEC is so system critical that so many people, so many efforts are done to protect this monopoly, whatever it takes?
Yes, thank you. Also, before going to that, on Thorsten's comment on renewables, it's also important to acknowledge that in Ukraine, renewables is all about electricity, but like in European countries, a huge share is heat production, and this is where I think Ukraine also lost in the past focus. And I think this area, when district heating companies consume lots of natural gas, is overlooked and should be addressed. But this is related to another big district heating reform, which is also not going forward at all. And yeah, in terms of monopolistic character of the energy sector, that's clear, I think, and this huge, if not the main constraint of the electricity market development, and unless its issue resolves, we will have this, problems. And also to conclude, I wanted to say that indeed, it's not a tragedy, right? We just see the first steps, which are quite worrying, yeah, but I hope, and I think this is my advice for civil society, for European Union and other donors to voice the message, and all together, I think we can change the way forward for Ukraine.
Thank you for this optimistic note. Olena, what would be your conclusion?
Yes, I was listening very carefully, also all participants and speakers. So for me, I would propose 3 pillars for the government or for all of us. What should save the situation? The first one is definitely the political will to move forward with Green Deal agenda. The second one is to respect all commitments and fulfill all obligations to the European Union and to international investors. And the third one is to further liberalize the market. So we definitely should further work on reforms on electricity market of Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Olena. And last not least, Alex Zawicki. What is your conclusion?
Yeah, I would like, in conclusion, to reflect on the just transition concept for Ukraine and the need for organized exit from the coal industry and structured approach to heavy industry. And I think we will not be able to solve structural problems without some very big political shifts, also in terms of attitude from European countries towards Ukraine, and especially European private capital to Ukraine, and to stop the extractive attitude towards Ukraine, which basically laid the foundation for monopolization of Ukraine's power sector. And I mentioned this is in my briefing, and which is available for all the participants. So we had huge investments from European private banks coming into DTEC, and they continue. And now we have this situation with the big pressure on the government from DTEC to introduce some beneficial conditions, also because DTEC has loans in European banks, and DTEC has also in April entered a default on these loans, and this shows how unsustainable is financing of the energy sector from European private banks. And I think that to have some real just transition and Green Deal for Ukraine, we need to change this colonial attitude. It's really a colonial, neo-colonial attitude towards Ukraine. And I think this is the major problem which materializes every occasion for last 3 decades in Ukraine. And I think what we have now is also very dangerous in terms of what is happening with Energoatom, the nuclear operator, which is losing its professional workers, its technical competence, and its even safety of operations, because it's being put in conditions where there is no effective management and where is no strategy for development of the company and eventually for decommissioning of nuclear units. So I think what we have when the government is like sacrificing the state-owned generation in favor of private is very dangerous and can lead to dire consequences, which can be unexpected.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Oleg, for adding these aspects that are for sure particularly important as well. So our time is over, unfortunately. I thank you, everyone, for participating. There's one more comment from Torsten Wöllert.
Yes, I wanted to thank you for organizing this, and I wanted to encourage you not to leave it with this one single one, because I think this is an ongoing subject, and I think it would be good to have this more or less regularly, I don't know, once a month or something, especially because the format, if we do it in this kind of video format, I hope we will all still, when we are no longer in confinement, be ready to participate in these kind of debates. I think it's very useful.
Okay, yeah, thank you for this suggestion. Yeah, I hope that everyone could benefit from this mutual update on assessments and positions and facts, what's going on. Particular thanks goes, of course, to our speakers. Thank you for preparing your inputs and sharing your views and assessments with us. I wish everyone a good evening, and we will inform you about coming similar events and publications. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. Yeah, okay, goodbye.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.